take your time. There's no deadline. You only get one chance to get it right. Because once a book's done, it's done. When you think you're done, put it aside for 6 months. Don't look at it. Because when you come back to it, you will have a fresh perspective.
That was Blake Sebring sharing his advice to young writers. Stay tuned to hear more about Blake's journey as a writer on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to the Local Author Podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community and highlighting their unique voices and perspectives. Today's author guest is Blake Sebring. Blake has worked in journalism since he was 15 years old, more than 40 years, mostly with the News Sentinel in Fort Wayne, Indiana, from 1980 to 2018, and as a freelancer for the Journal-Gazette. Brave at Heart is his 17th book, including 5 novels, all available on Amazon. He covered the Fort Wayne Comets hockey team for more than 1,500 games over 28 years through 2018 and was inducted into the Indiana Sportswriter and Sportscasters Hall of Fame in 2015. He is currently the News Center Director at Purdue University Fort Wayne, where he is inspired daily by the passion of the students, faculty, and staff. Welcome to Pages and Voices, Blake. I'm so pleased you could join us today.
Been looking forward to this.
Awesome. So you're going to share a reading from your newest book, Brave at Heart, A Christian Coach's Journey Through Life and Cancer. But before you do, let me tell our listeners about it. Thousands have inspired deafening noise in Indiana high school basketball gyms, but no one has ever created stone silence but maintain rapt attention like Mark Davidson. While suffering from incurable cancer, the 2-time Indiana High School State Championship coach of Fort Wayne Blackhawk Christian leaned into the urgency to share his faith in Jesus Christ with opposing teams following games. By the end of the 2 seasons, the court was filled with players and fans surrounding the coach to listen and pray. Every way that people have reacted and reached out is just another reminder that Christ is in me, he said. I try to tell that to people every time they say I inspire them. It's Jesus in me. God can use anybody and anything. It's in spite of me, but never because of me, that God works. It's not anything that we bring to the table. It's the power of God coming to the table and working through us. As his body weakened, Mark's faith only strengthened by sharing. His time on earth may be over, but Mark's story continues in those he inspired. Blake, the floor is yours.
Okay. For the last 19 months of his life, Mark Davidson knew he had terminal cancer. But during every minute of those days, he taught everyone around him how to live a godly life, how to lean into adversity, to present an example, and how to encourage growth in his own faith by sharing it with others. During his post-game mid-court huddles, his passion to speak about Jesus probably affected thousands over that time, including all those people in the stands leaning forward who were wondering what was so interesting that coach might be telling those kids. It was an opportunity not seen before, even in Indiana, the capital of high school basketball. While plenty of individuals had inspired lots of noise, no one had ever quieted high school basketball gyms in this state like that before. What was he saying? And by golly, why? What could possibly be so important when he could be concentrating on his own situation? Mark understood perfectly, saying, I feel like since the beginning, the Lord is saying, I'm going to open doors to you through cancer that otherwise never would have been opened. What I want you to do is to testify and make my name great. Lord, as long as there is breath in these lungs, I'll shout it from the mountaintops, Mark said. When people understand you are terminally sick, they'll say, let's at least hear the man out. If cancer opens that door, we'll use every opportunity that we have. Cancer may have scraped away his body, but the experience only strengthened Mark Davidson's soul. The more he shared, the stronger his message became. As the pounds continued to melt off, why was this man, who was obviously dying, taking from his limited time praying to share with so many people he didn't even know? Well, Mark prayed plenty, and this is what he believed Jesus asked him to do. To Davidson, there was nothing more important than taking this wonderful opportunity to witness to and hopefully help others. That's where the urgency came. He knew he was dying, and there was nothing anyone but God could do about it. And he was asking Mark to do this. He had limited time to get the word out, and after all, hadn't this been Mark's true life's calling anyway? This wasn't anything new to Mark. Just another more public opportunity with a clock running down. And he always thrived in those situations. Maybe he could still make a difference, maybe even a big one in somebody's life. And really, wouldn't that be the greatest reward possible? The most humbling, awe-inspiring answer from God, knowing he was doing exactly, precisely what the Lord wanted him to do? Despite the pain, the diminishing time, the deficit of humanity, Mark was standing up for what he believed in the most in this world, the hope of grace and mercy provided by Christ for everyone. If his message saved even one or two people and made them reconsider and study a little bit further, that would be worthy of his last breath if that's what it took. He was serving his God no matter what, literally. And it was all worth it. Every last sip of air used to say amen so many times with so many people. The ironic thing is, those same people strengthened him too. As much as he was giving out to them, he was getting much more in return with prayers and best wishes and people willing to help spread his message. Mark Davidson passed away May 9th, 2022, but not before helping others and gaining strength from fulfilling God's will. Can you imagine the thrill that must have been? Well, actually, yes, you can. That's what Mark's message and his testimony were really all about. It wasn't to bring attention to his struggle or to ask for prayers for himself. Mark knew those would come, but they would mean so much more if people listened to what he was saying and opened their hearts to Jesus so they could actually feel that same strength and peace he was experiencing. By giving them the hint, the inspiration to understand and share in what he was saying, everyone could feel his strength, even during horrible, inexplicable stress like what he was going through. If they just gave what he was telling them a chance, they could reconsider and be activated by his message. They could become believers. They really could. And that's why he took his time, gambled his last breaths, because he believed so much in the possibility that he just had to share it with others. What a waste most people would have done, giving up, pulling inward, hiding away until it was over. Mark didn't know how to do that. He'd been sharing his faith publicly since he was in school, and it was part of why he coached and worked at private schools all his life. He needed that opportunity to share, to provide the chance to make the difference in someone's life that makes an eternal difference. It's a large part of who he was. He just thought he'd have quite a few years left to share it with more people. God had other plans, but the urgency was put on Mark's heart. The timing and opportunity of Mark's last few months allowed him to reach out to many more people than he probably would have if he'd lived a longer life. He never questioned that. And like any coach giving a fantastic pregame speech, Mark said, "Let's do this," and charged out of the locker room door, ready to take his last chance and share it with whomever would listen. Cancer wasn't adversity to Mark Davidson. It was opportunity, the ultimate chance to fulfill God's will. It was the perfect way to reach out to those around him and ask them to join him, not in his upcoming death, but in his upcoming eternal life with Christ. That's what this book is about. Mark's time on earth may be over, but his story will continue in those he inspired.
Thank you for sharing. We're going to circle back to the book because I really do want to talk about this. It's an incredible story. But I want to talk about how this began for you. When did you decide, I want to be a writer?
I think I was a freshman in high school when I was in the youth group at Bethlehem Lutheran Church on South Anthony. And the group leader, Tom Pikarski, asked if anyone wanted to write short snippets of what the youth group was doing for the church monthly messenger.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I did that, and I enjoyed it, and I kind of got hooked from that. And my mom, she says I always wanted to be a writer. I don't recall that, but I know that there was a field trip to the newspaper sometime in grade school.
Okay.
And I supposedly told the driver that that's where I was going to work someday.
You knew.
I don't remember that.
You don't remember, but I guess you knew.
Yeah.
So, and then specifically, you became a sports writer. So when did you land on that?
That was not my plan, because it was funny. because back then you had to take all the statistics. And I thought that was boring. I wanted to be able to watch the action and decipher what was happening and why things were happening. But that was my opportunity to start early at the newspaper. Bill Scott used to cover high school sports, and I was taking tickets at a Harding volleyball game. And Bill came to cover the game, and when I was done, I went up and sat next to him, and I said, "How do you get started in this business?" And he said, "Can I finish the game and then I'll talk to you?" And he must have talked for 30, 45 minutes to me after the game. He was very, very gracious.
How old were you when you did that?
I was 15.
So, yeah, you did land on it early.
And then 2 weeks later, he called me and offered me a job.
Oh, okay.
Back in the day, the way Fort Wayne newspapers was set up, the Journal-Gazette was allowed in the building from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. The News Sentinel staff was only allowed in the building from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
So the News Sentinel would always use the box scores from the Journal because they weren't in at night to take all of them.
Sure.
And there was no such thing as faxing or email then.
Yeah, right.
So that meant they were publishing the mistakes that the Journal made. And they got fed up with that and decided they were going to break this pattern, and they were going to the pattern of the time frames. So they had to have a special rule where only part-timers could work at night. And that's what they called me to do. They wanted me to answer the phones and take the scores.
Oh, okay.
So there was me and Don Conversay, who later worked for the paper for 35, 40 years too.
Okay.
And so we would work. The problem was I didn't drive.
Yeah, you're 15, and
So
this is at night.
This is at night. So my dad would take me to work at 6 o'clock in the evening, go home, maybe take a nap, come get me at 2 or 3 in the morning.
And then you went to school the next day?
No, this was on weekends.
Oh, okay. Now that okay.
And then it expanded. As soon
Got
as
it.
I got my driver's license, it expanded to weekdays too.
Did you still
Nobody
have to
was ever happier to see their kid get their driver's license than my dad was.
I guess he would be, yes. So did you keep those hours of working until 3 in the morning? And
It got worse. I mean, I loved every second of it.
Okay. All right.
Saturdays, I would get up and cover a cross-country meet in the morning, maybe do a volleyball tournament match in the afternoon, and then go in the evening to take the scores and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'd sleep all day Sunday.
Oh, of course, you had to rest somewhere.
But this was before Reagan was elected, and they changed all the rules for what was part-time versus full-time.
Okay.
Because then I was only allowed to work 30 hours a week.
Yeah, right.
During the flood of 82, everybody went and covered the flood. I was the sports department that whole week. I got off of school. I covered the semi-state, and I did it all. It was
must have
so
been very
much
exciting.
fun. Oh, my
Yes.
gosh. It was thrilling.
How old were you then?
I was 18.
Okay.
And I'd already been doing it for 3 years. So it's
Yeah.
like they knew what I could do. They could trust me.
Yeah.
They knew I'd do the best I could, and that was good enough. And, and it was a blast.
It really sounds like it.
Yeah,
And
I
you
mean-
you cannot do that today. Like
No, you can't
cannot
come close to doing it today.
Yeah, you can't repeat that experience. So.
No.
That's
And
awesome.
I went to Henry's when I was 18. I was doing a report for school, and the executive editor, Stuart Spencer, took me to lunch at Henry's. Wanted to know if I wanted a beer. And I says, "I'm not 21. He goes, "That's all right." I said, "I got to go back to school. I don't think this would be appreciated." And everybody laughed. I think he was pulling my leg,
Right.
but I wasn't sure.
You might have got yourself a beer.
Yeah. But I did have to go back to school,
Yeah, you did.
and then
Yeah,
I
you
had to come
did.
back into work,
That would have ruined it.
But I have all kinds of experiences like that. Just amazing. Everybody there, features department, the theater group. Tom Zanger, Connie House-Zuber, Barb Watchman, Nancy Venderly, Susan Stone. Everybody took me under their wing. When people would go on vacations in the summer, I would fill in for them for 2 weeks.
So you knew how to do all of it
I
then.
did. I knew how to do the police beat. I knew how to write obituaries.
Okay.
I could do all of it. And that was a great lesson because Bud Gallmeyer and Steve Warden were the two who really taught me people are going to forget the scores in a week. They might remember the story behind why the game happened that way forever.
Right.
It's people, not stats.
Right.
But you learn by doing stats and filling in the stats.
Yes.
But then you get the most exciting stories are the people stories.
So you really had boots on the ground. You should put that in have you put that in one of your books?
No,
You should put your personal stories down.
I've probably done 150 of these interviews types of things. And it usually comes up.
So people can have access to it somewhere.
Yeah.
All right. So when did your sports writing branch out to book author?
In 2006, I had always hoped to write a book about the Comets. And I had always made a hobby of collecting all the funny stories throughout their history. Well, Joe Shibley and Carrie Hubbard had convinced me to follow Bud Gallmeyer when Bud retired in 1990 to cover the Comets. And I'm like, no way. Nobody wants to follow the legend.
Right.
And Bud was so gracious and so helpful that they told me, well, you can turn it down, but you really can't. You don't have a choice. There's nobody else to do this.
You're the best person for the job.
And they convinced me to do it. And it turned out I absolutely loved it. So when Joe passed away, he had a heart attack. My goal had always been to write a Comets book and dedicate it to him and Carrie.
Okay.
I was so mad at myself. And that was the kick in the pants I needed. Okay, you either have to do this or shut up about it forever.
Okay.
And so I put together the stories. I didn't sit down and say, I got to write a 300-page book. I took the stories and broke them into 5 or 6 per chapter, and each story was 5-6 paragraphs. So I didn't write a typical traditional book of chapters, which could scare the bejeebers out of you if you're just starting.
Right.
I wrote these funny stories, which I had already done in the paper, and I rewrote them and added to them and things like that. So I ended up with a 250-page book, and it was very, very well received. And I was still kicking myself because I didn't do it before Joe had passed.
Yeah, sure.
But okay, so I enjoyed that so much. I went right into Legends of the Comets, which was 10-page biographies of all the people who had had their numbers retired at that time. And that was so much fun, too, because I got to really meet them. And I had met them, but really, really get to know them. And I would interview them with their wives and sometimes their kids and just heard the most amazing personal stories. The thing that stuck out to me was that all of them thought they were going to be in Fort Wayne a very, very short time. Sure. They were on their way to the NHL. But back then it was only 6 teams. So they kind of got stuck here. And then they never left because they had families. Maybe they married local girls. But they all just came to love the community, and they gave so much to it.
Right.
And it was just so much fun to write about that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one story real quick. I wrote Bud's story in that. And what was interesting is that his son was a professor at Valparaiso, where I went. And he was in charge of recruiting black students to Valparaiso. Well, he got fired and sued the university. And Bud went up every day to sit in the courtroom and watch his son. And his son actually won the case, hands down.
Right.
And like 2 weeks later, Bud died. So I am out having dinner with his son, Bud Jr., who was a professor at Indiana Northwest. And he's like, yeah, I killed my dad. And I was like, oh my gosh, you had no idea. Because I always told Bud that Valpo was not the place he thought it was. Not at all. And I said, your son is absolutely right. And Bud came back after the trial, and he goes, I wish I would have listened to you more. You were right. I am so proud of him, I can't stand it. And I don't know how to tell him. And so I'm telling his son,
and what he
as
said.
we're at Hall's Triangle Park. I remember it vividly. He's crying, I'm crying. His son had never heard that. I mean, there were just stories like that throughout the whole book. And it's just like, I was so thankful to God that he let me help his son.
Yeah, it was a gift.
It was just unbelievable. And I got all kinds of letters and notes from people on that book, from their kids. And
this is the Legends of the Comets?
Legends of the Comets, which didn't really sell well, but I didn't care. It was so much fun to do.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So what advice would you give to an author who is writing their first book?
Okay.
It's just starting out.
I'll give you a couple.
Okay.
Take your time. There's no deadline. You only get one chance to get it right.
Yeah.
Because once a book's done, it's done. And you can't, I should have fixed that, or I should have added that. Or I tell people, and I've helped many, many people write books, when you think you're done, put it aside for 6 months. Don't look at it. Because when you come back to it, you will have a fresh perspective. It's like when teachers told you to proofread your work, you always read what you thought you wrote instead of what you actually wrote. So I tell kids all the time that I mentor, go walk the dog, go eat dinner, go call a friend, go unload the dishwasher, anything to change your perspective so you come back and see it fresh.
Yes.
And like I said, the important thing is you get one chance, and you want it to be something that lasts your lifetime. So give it to 10 friends to read before you publish, and have them be critical. Have them point out the holes. Have them see, well, I want to know more about this. Why didn't I know this happened? Why didn't you include this? That kind of thing.
Sure.
And because they're helping you, they're not criticizing.
Yeah, right.
They're not tearing you apart. They're like helping you fulfill your dream.
Right. Absolutely. So several of your books, nonfiction and fiction, are about sports. You do veer off your typical genre on a few books, The Lake Effect and the Lethal Ghost trilogy. Can you tell us where the inspiration for those books came from?
The Lake Effect is my attempt at a great American novel. And I had this idea since I was in high school, early college. The idea is that everyone at some time in their life between 22 and 32 goes through an event in their lives where after that event, they are an adult. They may not understand that until later. It could be the birth of a child. It could be the death of a parent. It could be a divorce. It doesn't have to be negative. It can be positive too, but it changes your life forever. And I tell this theory to people, and they all know immediately what theirs was.
Yeah, absolutely.
They may not have thought about it in that way, but I thought it would be a great attempt at a great American novel, because if everybody goes through it, how come we don't know about it? How come our parents never told us about it? So I kept trying this idea in my head, and I couldn't figure out how to write it. And I'm driving down the Pacific Coast Highway visiting a buddy in California, and a man and a woman are in the back seat. They're a couple. And I'm telling them this idea, and the woman says, well, why don't you tell it episodically? And this is like 10 years after I've been wrestling with this idea.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, duh. Perfect.
Right.
Slap the forehead. So I came home and I wrote it in like 6 months. And it's based on these 15 friends from college. And they get snowed in one night, lake effect snow, which Valpo got a lot of.
Yes.
And one of the guys who's kind of a jerk, a know-it-all, he comes up with this idea he heard from his uncle. And they all, because he's who he is and what he is, everybody poo-poos it and says he's full of it. And they finally says, we stayed up and, didn't go to bed to hear this. But one guy thought, maybe he's got something. And he decided that 10 years from when they graduated, he was going to look everybody up and see what their story was. And so that is the book.
Okay.
Him looking up all these people.
And getting their story when they became an adult at that point in their 20s.
And did they realize what the other guy was talking about at the time when it happened to them?
Right.
Some of them were tragic. Some of them were funny. Some of them were poignant. Some of them, all of it. And they were all examples from my friends.
Right.
So I was able to, because I went through it with them, and helped them in some ways, I could use them as examples. Like I have one buddy who was, he was trying to learn to fly. He was small biplanes. And he was doing touch and goes one day, and he understood he wasn't perfect, and he just had a baby, he and his wife, and he's like, you know what? I'm done. I've scratched this itch. I can't afford to have something happen and not be there for my wife and child.
Right.
I have another one, which was a buddy, was 30-some years old playing softball still, and he tried to stretch a single into a double and slid into second and broke his ankle.
Oh, yeah, that would end it.
Yeah, he was no longer, I'm not a kid anymore. I got to listen to my blasted wife, So they could be any kinds of things.
Yes, right.
And the beginning and the ending chapters were totally gifts from God because they tied everything together.
Okay.
And I'm very, very happy with that book. My dad was like, you got to hurry up and finish this book before I die, because he had a bunch of issues, including pancreatic cancer, which he had survived. And he goes, I got to send it to Oprah before I die. Oh, thanks, Dad. No pressure.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
So that was The Lake Effect.
Yes.
And then the Lethal Ghost trilogy.
Lethal Ghost was an idea I had. What are serial killers and how do we catch them? So I tried to, it's like, why are James Bond movies great? It's nothing to do with the actor who's playing James Bond. It's the villains.
Yeah, that's true.
So I tried to come up with what would make a great villain. Well, how do you catch serial killers? They have traits. They take trophies. They kill the same time of the month or year. They kill the same types of people, or they kill in the same areas. Well, what if there was a serial killer who didn't do any of those? That's why he's a lethal ghost. Nobody knows he's there. He doesn't kill people.
So this isn't a haunting.
No.
He's hard to find.
Nobody knows he's there.
Yeah.
Until he makes one mistake, and then somebody gets on the trail and won't give it up.
Okay.
But truthfully, he should have been able to get away with it completely, except he made one mistake.
Oh, okay. And I'm gonna.
And that became a trilogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I want to get my hands on those, because now I was reading Brave at Heart for the interview, but now I'm really interested and want to read that one. So your latest nonfiction book, which we've already touched on, it was published in November 2023, Brave at Heart. This is the story of the local basketball coach, Mark Davidson, whom you interviewed while he was dying from a rare form of cancer, was making a huge impact on this community. He had an incredible faith, and his mission was to share it boldly and widely until he couldn't share it anymore. Do you remember when you thought, I want to write his story?
Well, Mark and I had been friends for 10 years.
So you knew him?
Yes.
Okay.
I would go out to Black Hawk occasionally. I was covering the Comets, so I wasn't high school basketball.
Okay, right.
But I also knew Mark because he was doing strongman competitions. So once in a while, I'd go out when he had a big competition coming up, and we'd go sit out behind the gym in the school chairs leaning against the building, and we would talk theology.
Okay.
I was not on Mark's level in the faintest, because he could quote chapter and verse literally. He knew verses like nobody I've ever met. But Mark had the gift of... I call Mark a modern-day apostle because he could make anybody comfortable talking about faith.
Sure.
And he could sit there and you could have a conversation. It wasn't a lecture. It was a conversation.
Right.
And so we used to do that every once in a while. And so I knew he was doing this post-game thing. And I knew that he was getting crowds and crowds of people. Like at the start of the season, it would just be the two teams. And by the end of the season, like we showed on the back cover, the whole court is full.
Right.
With cheerleaders, school officials, people from the stands, all of them joining in and praying for him. And so I went out to do a story for the Journal-Gazette. And
was he sick at this time?
He was sick at this time.
Okay. I couldn't. So did he do this ever before he was sick too? You're getting there. Sorry.
I'm getting there.
I'm sorry, listeners. I'll stop talking.
It's okay. It's exciting.
I'm getting excited.
You're excited by it.
Yeah, right.
So I went out there to do a story on Mark for the Journal-Gazette about this. And as we're done, and he's still fairly healthy.
Okay.
I mean, he was still practicing with the team. He was still anyway, okay. So I said, did you ever think about doing a book? And he winked at me and he goes, well, bud, you better hurry. So the next Monday, I went out there in the morning, and for the next 7 weeks, the last 7 weeks of Mark's life,
yeah,
we would do an interview with he and Lisa, his wife, And I tried to keep it to an hour because I didn't want to wear him out for the rest of the day.
Yeah, sure.
And Lisa would tell me, no, this is the best part of the day because he's excited. He's into this. And he'll take a nap afterward. And yeah, and I'm still trying to be careful. You know, I mean, I don't want to impinge. And I would go home and I would transcribe everything and show it to him because I wanted him to be able to see it. Did I get this right? You know, did I get that right? What do you want to add? You know, and we would talk about it every day. The next day, that would be the first thing. And then I would come up with another 10 topics to talk about.
Okay.
And we did this pretty much every day.
For 7 weeks? For
7 weeks. We ended on a Thursday, and he passed on a Monday, on the following Monday.
Oh, so okay, because
and
I must have I have my notes wrong then. So he just passed like 4 days later.
He was hanging on in part.
Oh, my word.
I think that's why this was so hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
He wanted to be there when they named his replacement as the coach so he could introduce him to the team and pray with them. And that was Matt Roth, who has one of the best chapters in the book.
Okay.
Of many.
So he was really sick when he was doing this interview. So, I mean, this was not just like he felt bad and he just kept going.
He'd be sitting at home in his lazy boy, you know, or on the couch.
He was on pain medicine, I assume.
Yes. And Lisa would be there, and Lisa has a fantastic memory. I call her the calendar lady because she could tell you the dates things happen. And if she was off, maybe 1 out of 10 or 15, and it was off by a day.
Okay.
You know, so she was fantastic helping with that part of it.
Yeah.
So
they were a good team.
They were fantastic. And so I thought we were finished. The original goal was to publish it in front of the next basketball season. They were naming the court after Mark. It was a full house. And we got to get to that. You know, I mean.
Right.
But Lisa was not ready, and that was fine.
Sure.
We ended up publishing 2 years later.
Okay.
There were so many things going on. Their first son and his wife had a baby. The first grandchild, she got a puppy. 2 of the kids got married. One of them graduated from school. Another one graduated from Blackhawk. They won another state title.
Very busy.
I mean, it was incredible. Plus, they adopted 2 kids from.
I saw that. Yeah.
You know, and they were still in school, and they were starting sports and things. I mean, it was just an incredibly busy time. Plus, she's mourning.
Yeah, right. She'd been with him a very long time, right?
Yes.
He was 49 when he passed. Do I have that right?
Yes.
And they got together when they were teenagers.
Yes.
Right. So the majority of her life.
Yes. And they have 7 kids, you know. I mean, there's a lot to it. And she's trying to make sure her kids are okay through all this, of course. She brought her mother here to live in a facility here so she could see her more often. I mean, there was just a lot going on. And I know I forgot. She's continuing to teach, you know, at Blackhawk. Right. She's a French teacher. There was just a lot going on.
So that's why.
Plus, we still had people sending us chapters.
Right.
Because we asked people, the goal was, don't tell me Mark's a great guy. Show me. Tell me how he was a great guy.
Give me your stories.
How he affected you. And I would have people sending me chapters that I didn't even know were coming. You know, the goal was to have a chapter with Mark and Lisa, have a chapter with someone else, interact them throughout the story. Well, we ended up having too many. We had to trim some of them. Because,
he seemed beloved.
Oh, very much so.
Everybody.
Because the goal was we thought we were going to have a 350-page book, and the goal was going to be to keep it under $20 so it was still affordable to people.
Okay.
And so this was when Amazon was coming off of COVID price ranges and stuff, and they increased their prices and stuff too.
So when do you go from? So this book is 305 pages or something.
Something.
Is that what I'm
I think
looking
it was 312. I think.
So when you get past 350, the price of a book goes up.
Well, I was just very careful about that.
Okay. Sure.
Because to me, we didn't write this book to get rich.
Yeah.
We were hoping to break even, and we thought his story was worth it, and it was. I mean, Lisa has gotten letters and emails from people talking about how it has changed their lives and things. And our goal, our goal was if we could get 2 people to reconsider and possibly become Christians, totally, that was great. That was worth it.
That was
what a blessing,
Sure.
And I'm sure, I don't know, but I think there were more.
Okay.
Yeah. And she got a letter from a woman whose brother was in prison, and he read the book and started hosting Bible studies, including in the book. We've heard many people. Concordia is offering a class this year, including the book.
Okay. So it's really inspiring.
It's
all kinds
incredible.
Of people.
I mean, it's just nuts.
It's
Black
very
Hawk,
easy to read. It's a great book.
Thank you. Black Hawk, we gave them copies of the book to give to the opposing coaches. The coach of the men, girls, and boys teams could give it to the opposing coaches before games and things.
Sure.
So I've gotten a lot of notes that way.
Okay.
From people.
So it sounds like you do keep in touch with the Davidson family.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Lisa just had her birthday the other day.
A special one? A milestone?
No, not quite. They have 2 more grandsons coming. I mean, they have 2 of their sons are serving or working overseas. One is at a school in...
Playing basketball?
No, one's in France playing basketball.
Oh, okay.
And another one, he and his wife are teachers at a missionary school.
So you and I previously talked about how this book took it out of you. In your own words, it just drained me. Talk to me about that.
I put everything I have into any book I write. This one required more.
Yeah.
This one...
Some emotional resiliency,
yes,
I'm sure.
Because I lost my friend, and we became very close during this time, of course. And part of it, we didn't know when we were going to publish. We had no idea. But we finally said, if we don't do this before the second season starts, it's really going to lose its impact.
Sure.
We need to really push to get this going and get it out. And that took a lot out too. I was trying to be, it's so hard because I was trying to give Lisa so much grace, understandably.
Yeah.
And parts of the books changed over that time too, It was both a testimonial and a testimony, So yeah, it was, I've done probably 15 media interviews, and it's just hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that.
And it needed to be. If this is one of those, if it had affected me, I can do this.
Yeah, if it hadn't
that would have been totally wrong. That would not have worked.
No, it wouldn't have.
I needed to be invested in this and to be all in.
Right, absolutely.
It's the only way to do it.
I agree. So how long did it then? It sounds like it took you a little while to finish up the book. Like you had the meat of it, but to get it all together and to really finish it up. So how long did that take?
It probably took a year and a half.
Okay.
We took the first 6 months was all the interviews. And then people would send me chapters. And those were okay. That was fine. I would edit them. But then as we started getting more and more, I'm like, I got to trim some of these chapters down, And working with the kids was difficult too, obviously. But I felt it was really important to have their voice in there.
Yeah.
With a little perspective of a year and that kind of thing. And Lisa did a lot of work on that. But those are some of the best chapters in the book. I think Marcus is either going to be a great writer or a great pastor. I really do. He has got a gift, and it was challenging. And then talking to the wives of the 3 boys.
Did they all get to meet him? They
everybody.
All knew him?
Yep, everybody.
Okay. Well, I just keep thinking what a gift this is going to be to future generations in that family.
Well, that's what I told Lisa. That was kind of one of the things that was really cool about it is I told her when she was struggling, I said, Lisa, Jack is their first grandson. I said, this is how Jack and all his cousins are going to get to know their grandfather.
Yeah. Right.
And because he wasn't born yet. And I said, and the other thing is, and I told the kids this, and I think it's in one of the things, or the dedication, I said, I hope that 30 years from now, when you take this book off the shelf, you can still hear his voice.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
You're going to make me cry.
Well, and I knew that because when I wrote Betty Stein's book, that I still pull Betty Stein's book out. And I can hear her voice.
Yeah.
Still kicking my tail.
Also a gift to the community. I tell you. I mean, you just wonder how many of those stories have been lost. So I love that their stories haven't been lost. So you self-publish, and you decided early on to take the publication of your books into your own hands. So tell our listeners about your experience and how you handled getting your books into the hands of readers.
I had a few publishers early, and I don't know how to say this. There was disasters, okay?
Yeah.
Legends of the Comets, there was a publisher. The deal was he was going to bring 1,000 books to opening night at the Comets game that season. And I had invited all the legends to come. He never showed up. He didn't call me till 4 p.m. to say he wasn't coming. We had already run excerpts in the paper.
Yeah, you couldn't dial that back, could you?
It was humiliating.
Oh, I'm sorry that happened.
I had to cover the game that night, of course. And people are asking, what happened with the book the whole night? And yeah. And then The Lake Effect was published as well. And it was by a new company that was trying to get off the ground. And I've never gotten the full proceeds from that. And it got to the point where I was so worried about the business of the process that it took the fun out of the writing.
Yeah.
And I decided to heck with it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just going to write. And I developed my own team. I've got people who I knew from the newspaper who have become my book family.
Yeah.
Angel North, Melody Foreman, and Andy Nichols. Angel is the production designer, and she designs the cover. She did this cover. The only thing I contributed to this cover was Mark putting his fists through the type. And she'd already thought of that, she said. And I believe her. She's that good.
Right.
And then Melody was a copy editor at the News Sentinel, and this is her hobby. She edits the books.
Okay.
And she'll call me and say, hey, I want to, go ahead. I don't even need to ask you. I don't even need to know what it is. I just trust you. Go ahead.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely.
And Andy is the cover artist when we use illustrations, like Perfect, the story about the 1993 Comets' perfect playoff run. We couldn't. The picture was from the News Sentinel, but since the News Sentinel is no more, there was no one to ask for permission to run that photograph.
Oh.
So he drew the photograph.
Oh,
yeah. So,
okay, that's clever.
Yeah, and so he's done that 2 or 3 times for me. So I pay them, and they're all a team, and they're all Elmhurst graduates, and I went to Harding. So if we need a new team member, we got to find another school that went out of business.
Defunct high school.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So,
I mean, we're a family. We really are. I got him a coffee cup for Christmas called the BDS Publishing, which is not a real company.
It's not a real company. So
No.
this is just your friends helping you.
Yes.
You pay them, but
Yes.
it doesn't have an official company behind it. Okay,
No. And I don't want it to be either.
Right.
I want us to control it.
Yes.
I want us to keep having fun at it.
Absolutely.
So
I understand that. So you have a lot of books to your credit. Do you have a favorite?
hopefully the next one.
Hopefully the next one's your favorite.
Yeah. And I don't even know what that's going to be
I was going to
yet.
say, any idea? No ideas brewing, huh?
I have an idea to continue the mystery series,
Okay.
but it's still percolating.
All right.
It's still banging around in my head. I write down ideas every once in a while. And
Yeah.
I know 2 stories, nonfiction, that I can't wait to tell, but it's not time yet.
It will be sports related. Yeah, you don't know.
No, I don't want to get pigeonholed. If I find a
good for
story, I want to tell it. I don't
Yeah.
care if it's sports or it could be politics, although I really doubt it. But, it could be
Right.
anything.
Right.
It could be the next Betty Stein's type story. It could be something like that. I mean, I want to find the greatest stories I can tell and tell them. And if it's sports,
Appreciate
okay.
that.
If it's not, okay.
Yeah.
You know,
You're open.
and I tell people stories. I I always told people stories, even at the newspaper. Even if it was this much sports, I could tell it, you know. I once wrote a story for a Comets game that I put the final score in the last paragraph and nobody even noticed. You know, because it was a fantastic people story.
Right.
One night, Pascal Morency, the Comets enforcer at the time, scored a goal off the opening face-off and went absolutely nuts, throwing himself against the boards. And it's like, what in the world happened to him? And so I went and asked people. And I quit covering the game. And they said, okay, well, we have this girl who has some physical disabilities. And she came into the locker room after the game, before the game today, to go around and say hi to everybody. And the idea is to show the guys, even though you're tired, it's the end of the season, this is what you're playing with. Okay, that's just the start of it. Turns out he had been suspended the night before and was sitting in the upper deck, and she came up all those stairs with half an arm and half a leg and sat next to him for the whole game.
Oh.
So in the locker room the next day, she's the last guy she sees. And somebody says, tell her you're going to win a fight for her. And he goes, no, I'm going to score a goal for you. He scored 4 goals all year. You dummy, tell him you're going to win a fight. You can handle that. Right. So he scores the goal. They end up winning like 2-0. It was the game-winning goal. And then I'm hearing all this. So I grab her and the photographer, and we go downstairs. And we have this picture of her sitting on his lap after the game, and he gives her the puck. I mean, it just, nobody remembered the score. They remembered the Pascal Morency story forever.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, and I loved telling those kind of stories because those were pure gold because nobody will ever forget them.
Yeah.
But everybody forgot the score. You know, I forgot the score. I'm not sure 2-0 was the score, but I know that story by heart. You know,
yeah,
I mean,
you'll never forget
and I
that.
love telling those kind of stories.
Right. You have a lot of love and passion for your job. That's what I'm seeing and hearing
I
right
love
now.
working with the students. They are amazing. They inspire me every day. I mean, it's just incredible how people talk about kids today don't want to work. Well, you haven't been on that campus in a while.
Yeah.
Because those kids, usually I talk to them about what they're studying, what they're so excited about, and I might get to ask another question 10 minutes later.
Because they jump in. They tell you everything.
They tell you everything, and they want to tell you everything because they're so excited about it. It is so much fun.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
And it's like, thank goodness I have a tape recorder because, a recorder because I couldn't write it all down fast enough. You know, and I'm just like, whoa, you know. But it's like every day. It's every day I get to hear those kind of stories.
How long have you been out at Purdue Fort Wayne?
Just started my 3rd year.
Okay. So I'm going to ask some fun questions now.
And I have fun answers for you.
Okay, great. I like that. So do you have a kryptonite as a writer?
Marketing. Trying to get the message out that you have these books to the general public is very, very difficult. Even though I do interviews and social media postings and all kinds of things.
It takes a special kind of energy.
It really does. And it gets frustrating. Like right now, we are trying to break out of the basketball Blackhawk Christian niche for Mark's book. How do we get it out to a broader audience who might be affected and might enjoy it?
Sure.
Amazon has an algorithm that if you get 100 reviews, that's when it kicks in. We're at 31.
Okay.
And just
so you'd like more reviews?
Love more reviews.
Listeners,
I don't care if
reviews.
I don't care if they're negative. I mean, if there's something I needed to do better, I can take it. You know?
Okay.
That's fine. The most I've ever had on a book, I think, was 58 for Lethal Ghost.
All right. I'm going to write this down.
So, yeah.
Reviews.
So the reviews all help. And then please share it on your social media. You know, wouldn't you love to write something or share something positive on your social media? Especially during this time of year with the election coming up and such.
Yes, that's right. Let's keep it positive, folks. So what's your favorite thing to do on your time off?
I like to cook and I like to read. And I have 6 godsons. And I'm not married. I've never been married. I don't have any grandkids of my own. But I have grandkids whenever I want them.
Yeah, you borrow somebody else's.
When these boys were young, their parents would say, come get your godson out of here before we kill him. And I never had any problem with any of them. I take 3 or 4 of them to the movies, and everybody think I was out of my tree. But I never had any problem with them.
Yeah, you enjoyed it.
I'm a big believer in that you find out what kind of parent you are and how well you're doing by how your kids behave when you're not around.
Yes.
And people were doing better than they thought.
That's awfully nice of you to say as a parent. I hope other people feel that way about me. So wait a minute. I had another a question off that question. So you like to cook and you like to read. What do you like to cook? Anything?
Anything, yeah. I mean, I take my lunch to work every day. Save money that way.
Yeah.
It's $10
So is this gourmet stuff?
No. It's just basics.
Pasta?
No, I do casseroles. Right now I have green beans and onions and sausage in the crock pot.
Yeah.
I do a lot of crock pot.
Yeah.
I do lasagna. I do spaghetti sauce. I do casseroles like crazy. I do my own coleslaw. I do,
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm functional.
Yeah.
I had great teachers, my grandmother and my mom. So
that's great. I love that. And who do you read?
Everybody.
Okay.
Jeffrey Archer. I prefer fiction.
Sure.
Clive Cussler, Stephen King, sometimes James Patterson. I'm reading. I read just all kinds of people. Lawrence Block, Clive Cussler, Robert Parker. Dean Koontz.
Oh, yeah, I like
And I
Dean
tell
Koontz.
people if they want to write, read, because then you can study how these authors did their cadence of their dialogue. How did they do the pacing? Stephen King often has a little kid in his books. And nobody ever wants anything to happen to the little kid. And the little kids only gravitate to the good people. They instinctually know the bad people. So that makes, if somebody cares for the little kid, that makes you care for them. You care for the good people in his books.
Right.
You don't want anything bad to happen to them.
Right.
That's where the fear comes in. That's as important as creating the monsters.
Sure.
Dean Koontz always has a dog in his books.
He does. Yeah.
And you don't want anything to happen to the dog or its master. And it sucks you in. It sets you up. You can study all those kind of things by reading. James Patterson writes the shortest chapters in Earth.
He does.
But he controls the pace that way. It's always moving forward.
It is. That's the one common thread I've heard from every author on this podcast is if you want to be a good writer, you need to be an avid reader. Read widely, read everything. And I think that's very true. It's definitely, I just keep opening up new books and new authors, and it's true. You discover something new with all of them.
And it's okay. Don't get totally lost in the story. Watch how they do it.
Right. Yes.
If you want to become a writer, that's the best way to learn.
So if you could spend the day with another sports author, who would it be?
It wouldn't be a sports author. It would be Stephen King. Although the funny thing is, when I wrote Homecoming Game, it was number 2 on Amazon's best new sports fiction books behind a Stephen King book. Okay?
Sure.
My thought is I have always had on my bucket list, I want to interview Stephen King about his time living in Fort Wayne.
Stephen King, are you listening?
And how that affected his writing.
Yeah.
It was right after his folks got divorced, I believe, and
That's
his
what I
dad
understand
lived
as well.
here.
Yes.
And I just think there has to be some impact there.
I have a funny story about Stephen King. I used to work with a woman who lived in Maine. And she used to work at the local Kmart. And Stephen King came up to the returns counter and said, I have a return. And she said, I need to see your ID. And he said, I'm Stephen King. And she says, I'm Michelle Black. I need to see your ID. She didn't know who Stephen King was.
I bet she does now.
And I laughed so hard when she told me that story. That was just so her. And
it seems like everything you hear is he's a really down-to-earth person. That he doesn't take himself too seriously, especially in Maine.
Right. But you would think he'd be able to get away with the return at Kmart without his ID because, most folks do know who Stephen King is. He's got a very distinct look.
Right.
So if you could interview any sports figure, living or dead, who would you choose?
Johnny Bright, who is the second greatest athlete from Fort Wayne ever, behind Rod Woodson. Johnny Bright went to Central, where it was the black high school in Fort Wayne.
Okay.
It's where if you were black, that's where you went. And then when it closed, that's when Northrop opened. Johnny played basketball, softball, football. He was the best athlete in the state, and there's really no doubt about it.
Okay.
At the time, he was also a softball pitcher.
What years?
This was like in the 50s.
Okay.
Indiana and Purdue would not recruit him because he was a black man.
Oh, jeez.
And Notre Dame, he didn't have the grades, supposedly. But, so he ended up going to Drake, where he could run track, and he was a one-man track team. If they had the decathlon there, he would have killed it. He was All-American in track. Well, he was also, this was when Drake was playing in that version of the Big Eight, which was the big football conference in that part of the country, with Oklahoma A&M and other schools, the big schools then. And Johnny was, for 3 years, he was the leading running back in the country.
Okay.
Except there was extreme racism, and Oklahoma A&M decided they were going to injure him in that game, and they were going to take him out. And they took him out. Some guy came through the line. He didn't even have the ball. He was standing up straight. He was relaxed. The ball was going the other way. And this guy hit him with an elbow and broke his jaw and knocked him out of the game. The interesting thing about that was it was all captured on film. It won a Pulitzer Prize.
Wow.
It appeared in one of the famous New York magazines, and it went all across the country. And they ended up getting that player suspended. Johnny was able to come back at the end of the year. But he was a Heisman Trophy candidate, which was amazing at the time as a black man. And he couldn't compile the numbers to get there. So he goes into the NFL draft. He gets drafted by Philadelphia. And he goes, I'm not going to go be the first black man to play at Philadelphia. So he goes to the Canadian Football League, where he has a Hall of Fame career, rushes for 10,000 yards, wins a couple MVP awards, wins the Grey Cup. And instead of coming home after all that, he stays there and becomes this nationwide renowned educator. They named schools after him. He was the principal of the school. I think he died in 1982.
Okay.
And just an amazing man. And I would love to have had the chance to talk to him about what it was all like, because he had to know what the deal was here. I mean, if IU and Purdue, which were not exactly royalty in the Big Ten in any sport at the time, wouldn't even talk to you about coming to play there.
Right.
And you're the best athlete in the state by far, and they just ignore you. And he was exactly right about going to Philadelphia. I mean, as rough as those
IU
fans
and
are.
Purdue. Was it?
Right. It was like, why would I, after I've been through this, why would I go there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And he still becomes... He has an amazing life, an
made a very
amazing
smart
athletic
move.
career, and an amazing professional career. I just think that would be a fascinating discussion.
Absolutely. Blake, I think I know what your next act should be. I think you should host a podcast, and you need to talk about these sports people. You have all the info.
I wrote that book.
And it's fascinating.
It's called Fort Wayne Sports History, and it's the least selling book of any I've ever written.
Well,
It's amazing. I don't know why, and I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, well... I know if we had that answer, we'd have $1 million.
I understand. Yeah, no, but I mean, I get it. I really get it.
Maybe if you started a podcast and started telling all these stories, people would be like, oh, let me go get that book.
I developed a page on Facebook. To every page of that book is one page per date, 365 pages.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it includes everything in Fort Wayne sports that was marketable or even that happened that influenced the national sports scene, everything. There's a lot, too. There's an amazing amount of things that lasted.
Right.
That people just don't know.
Yeah.
And, I just...
Local important history that can't be lost.
And the reason I wrote it is because Bud Gallmeyer was gone. Hilliard Chase was soon to pass. Bob Chase was getting up there in years. Bob Parker was gone. Hilliard Gates was gone. All these people. And I didn't want to lose it. I was like, this was all scattered. Yeah. It was all in different places, and I just wanted to put it in one place so it could be there in 25 years whenever somebody gets interested again and wants to find out what happened. It's all there for them, and then they can start from there.
It's amazing. I love it. Who would play Blake Sebring in the movie of your life?
Well, everybody always said it would be Philip Seymour Hoffman.
I knew you were going to say that because that's what I was thinking in my head. I knew you were going to say that.
He'd have to wear a skull cap, though,
Yeah, he did have a bunch of hair, didn't he?
Yeah. But that a friend of mine pointed that out 20-some years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, that ship has sailed.
Yeah. So I really don't know other than that. I mean,
I know that's the one I came up with too, for real.
It
And I
makes
didn't have a
sense.
backup.
It makes sense.
And now I'm sitting here staring at you because I'm like, who would be the next? Who would be a good person?
It makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So, last but not least, how can listeners reach you?
I'm available on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me through PFW. I'm not shy. I'm not really hard to find.
Okay.
Lots of people know me. I mean,
Yeah.
I like helping people write their own books. I don't want to write their books for them. I think they need to write them if they're going to do them. I've had 500 people over the years saying, you need to write my book. No, you need to write your book.
Right. I'll just help you.
Yeah,
edit it.
I'll help you tell you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you the tricks of the trade, but you need to do it.
Yeah.
And then they get discouraged and they don't want to do it.
Seems daunting, doesn't it?
It does. If you sit down and think you got to write 300 pages, it's just like when you were in school and you had to write 10-page term paper or whatever. You won't do it. You put it off. But the secret is you write the first sentence, you write the second sentence, and then you start on the second paragraph. And you just keep adding. That's all it is. You don't worry about how long it is or how long it takes. You just keep going.
Yeah. That first sentence is the hardest.
It always is. It's horrible. But if you don't do it, you're not going to get anywhere.
No, that's absolutely right.
And let it be fun. Don't make it a burden. Let it be fun. Giggle at yourself when you write something funny. Cry when you write something tearful. Or groan if it's something. If it's a bad pun, get into it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I told you, when I write, I don't have any idea. When I'm into it, I have no idea how fast I'm typing. I don't even think about it. I just, in the stream of consciousness, I just go with it.
Okay. All right. Well, Blake, thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices today. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thanks. That was fun.
Yeah. And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices, a source for local authors and their stories. From the studios of Access Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library in downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm your host, Meg Bell. A special thank you to Kay Gregg for her work engineering and editing this episode. We've explored fascinating stories and insightful discussions today, but our journey doesn't end here. Find more episodes of Pages and Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the area's authors and their insights into the written word. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.